Ready as will ever be. Good afternoon? Yeah, I guess good afternoon. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Behind me is Jay Kaplan, or below me is Jay Kaplan. Above me is Joe Tufaro from Last Word on Sports. And welcome to the On the Sports Lines In With the New NFL and CFP special. Yes, after doing our last show of 2020 in typical 2020 fashion, we decided to do one more because we can't get enough of 2020. NFL's Week 17 is one of the most action-packed that we've ever seen. Thank you, third wild card. And this college football's national semifinals are this New Year's Day. So let's get 2020 out of our system and ring in the new of 2021, gentlemen. We have NFL and college football talk to talk about. All right, so that's clap it up as the New York Giants are still in the playoff hunt despite being 5-10. Why? How? One of these two things might happen for Big Blue. One, they become the first ever 6-10 playoff team in history. Or two, they get the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. That is the thing that might happen. Seriously. Their opponents are the team that they lost to in Week 5 by the score of 37-34, the Dallas Cowboys. Winner of this tilt in MetLife stays in contention for the NFC East for about 7 to 8 more hours. Let's take a look at the offensive keys on Sunday with Joe.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and just thinking through this game and thinking through the last few games of the Giants, the thing that's been missing is on offense has been the ability of Daniel Jones to run the ball. And taking away that threat of him pulling it out and running for 80, 90 at some point, which he did against Philadelphia. He's done it against Washington. He's done it against a lot of the teams in the games that they've won. The fact that he's standing back there and can deliver the ball and can move around the pocket is not enough of a threat to keep guys off of the running game, and it takes away all the RPOs. It takes away a lot of their play action stuff because, again, you're just concentrating on the one running back that they have. So I think offensively, I would hope to see that he is able to call the entire playbook. And that's kind of what's been missing to me lately is the options just aren't there. You can see it in the red zone. You can see that, the quarterback draw isn't there. So guys don't mind playing man-to-man, turning their back on him. So it's been hurting him in that way. And I think that's been the biggest in the end. I think if that gets fixed and that gets turned around, and he came out of last game healthy, so he's got a week more to recover. Hopefully, Jason Garrett will have the entire playbook to use. Without that, it makes it very difficult on him to do that because, again, they don't have big separation receivers. They don't have a lot of big bodies to throw to where you just throw the ball up. Golden Tate is their best 50-50 receiver, but he's 5'10", so doesn't really help you that much in a lot of situations. So offensively, that's what I'd like to see is the entire playbook opened up.
Agreed.
All right, Jay, you have the defense. They really didn't do anything defensively against the Cowboys, especially when Andy Dalton lit them up after Dak Prescott injured in Week 5. How does the defense slow down what has been a hot Dallas Cowboys offense?
Well, look, I mean, you got three things that I'm going to be looking at from the defense. In their 4-game winning streak, the defense created turnovers, made stops on third down, and limited touchdowns in the red zone. None of that's happened in the current 3-game losing streak. Logan Ryan, recovering that botched handoff at the goal line late in Sunday's game against the Ravens when Baltimore was on the verge of taking that 3-touchdown lead. That was the Giants' first takeaway in 3 games. They had 10 takeaways during that 4-game winning streak. Giants had a fumble recovery and interception in the Week 5 loss to the Cowboys. Third downs. The Ravens converted 8 of 11 on Sunday. On the flip side, the Giants were just 1 of 10 on third downs on their own when they had the ball on their own. The week before, defense allowed Cleveland to convert 9 of 13 first downs in that 20-6 loss. In Week 5 against the Cowboys, they let Dallas convert 5 of 9. Ravens scored 3 touchdowns on 6 drives inside the red zone. That's too much. The Giants' margin of error, especially if Daniel Jones is not 100% healthy and Jason Garrett does not have the option of running the full playbook, the margin's too thin. The way the offense has been playing of late, they can't, unless they can do what Joe is suggesting, they can't overcome an opponent scoring 3 touchdowns. Defense needs to hold the opponents to field goals to give the offense a chance. Giants allowed the Cowboys 5 scoring drives from inside the red zone in that Week 5 loss. Cowboys scored touchdowns on drives 2, 3, and 4 after scoring field goals on drive 1 and drive 5. Drive 5 obviously being that game-winning field goal. And one of the few games this season where the Giants offense looked NFL level legitimate, in that week 5 loss to the Cowboys, putting up 34 points, committing just 1 turnover, converting 7 of 13 third downs, and winning time of possession by almost 5 minutes. The defense had the team taking 2 steps back for every 2 steps forward by the offense. Doing it in the first half and part of the second half against Dak Prescott is one thing, but after Prescott got hurt, as you said, Rabbi, Andy Dalton, lit them up. I mean, that's no disrespect to Dalton. We all know he could still start for almost half the teams in the NFL, but he's not as mobile as Prescott and not a threat with his legs, and yet the Giants could not keep the Cowboys offense in check. But Dallas is coming in red hot. They've run 3 straight. And since week 14, they have a plus 51 point differential and a plus 9 turnover differential. Giants defense is going to have their work cut out for them again.
Well, they always do have their work cut out for them. But when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, I think Zeke Elliott is kind of more of a change of pace on this team. He's only got for 937 yards this year. Is still a touchdown threat when they get into the red zone, and that's going to be where he's most dangerous. But the big play capability of Cooper, Lamb, and Gallup is dangerous in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Cooper's already at 1,000 yards this season and is still a guy who is number 1 wide receiver. And as Andy Dalton has gotten more comfortable with this Dallas Cowboy offense, he's become a legitimate top 10 wide receiver threat. But then you have CeeDee Lamb, who's had already 100 targets this year and is at 892 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then the guy who was the most dangerous person on the field Sunday against the Eagles, and that's Michael Gallup. Having him as a number 3 wide receiver is a guy who would be number 2 or even number 1 wide receiver on any other team. Like
how scary is that?
Oh, it's tremendously scary. If they had a really, really good quarterback, I think this team would not be at this point of 6-9. If they had
a better offensive line, offensive line, Rabbi, Zeke would be the Zeke of old, and they would have this division locked up already.
I don't know if the Zeke is the Zeke of old anymore because he's had a lot of mileage on him, and I think there's a lot of him being said that his work ethic, I don't think, is the same work ethic as other running backs.
Maybe not.
He hasn't adjusted.
I'm just saying that a better offensive line would open up more holes for him. That's all.
Oh, yeah. That would be mostly for any running back out there.
Right.
But you do have to make plays, and I think Tony Pollard has actually made a bunch of plays and is a different type of running back than Zeke Elliott does. He is a guy that you have to watch out of the red zone, too. He has 4 touchdowns this year. I think this is a team that Dallas, they have a lot of firepower. If Dalton can kind of get everything going together, I think the Giants have a playbook on Dalton now instead of coming in cold like they did in week 5. I think this is going to be a very, very tight game. I think, though, the Giants can actually go tit for tat with the Cowboys because that Cowboys defense is porous. I think that 21 will definitely not do it for either team. I'm looking more to be in the 40s in this game.
Same as last time.
But if it is the kind of defensive slugfest that it was when they played Seattle, I would expect the Giants victory. But who the hell knows in this game, and who the hell knows in 2020 with the Giants? Again, they could be a 6-10 division champion hosting a playoff game. How 2020 and crazy is that?
Exhibit A.
Bring on Tom Brady.
Oh, God. Imagine if this team ends up playing Tom Brady and the Bucks in the first round.
And that would be the matchup if things stand as they are.
Thanks to
right now it would be the NFC East champion hosting the Tampa Bay Bucks.
For a while, we thought it was going to be a choice between Seattle and the Rams, and that would have been fantastic. But we'll take Tampa Bay.
I think anybody would take Tampa Bay. I think we're not going to talk about them on this show because they're kind of locked into their playoff seeding. Yeah. But Tampa Bay is kind of a team that is feasted on bad teams and really doesn't have a quality win on their schedule this year. So we'll see what happens with Tampa Bay. I still think they're one of the 4 best teams in the NFC, and I would be surprised if the NFC East champion beat them. But I wouldn't be surprised if the NFC East champion beat them. Because, again, this is 2020, and teams who were 7-9 have actually won their first-round playoff games. Take Exhibit A, take a look at Beast Mode against what was the reigning Super Bowl champions the year after in that Quake game. All right. beast mode Quake game. Seattle has a lot of weird games. Moving on. For one of these two teams to make the postseason, though, they're going to need another result to happen Sunday night. And yes, this is a game that was actually picked to be a Sunday night game because it's the only game on the schedule where one team is winning in and losing out. That is, unless these two teams, the Giants and Cowboys, tie on Sunday. And oh boy, it was the egg on the face of NBC on this one. But I don't think that's going to happen. Knock on wood. The Philadelphia Eagles would have to defeat the current division leaders, the Washington football team, for that to happen. So much has changed expectation-wise since these two teams met in week 1, and it was an upset when the Philadelphia Eagles lost. Now they just lose for fun. So let's preview this. I'm going to talk about the Washington football team real quick, and Joe, you can pile on Dwayne Haskins in just a moment. Who knows what?
Not too much.
No. You can pile as much as possible.
I want Dwayne Haskins that you want. Leave Alex Smith to me.
You can leave Alex Smith to you. For the Philadelphia Eagles to win, I think they're going to need the same performance that they've had from Jalen Hurts these past few weeks. Yeah. I think Hurts provides a new dimension to this offense, running-wise, and I think he's still going to make mistakes, but I think this team has really picked up their pace and picked up their energy with Hurts as quarterback. I don't know what Carson Wentz's future is going to be in Philadelphia, and honestly, I don't care. But I think this Philadelphia Eagles team is better served right now with Jalen Hurts as quarterback because there's more stuff that they can do in the future. I think Hurts' arm is still a very big asset to this team. His accuracy is going to be his one big problem. However, in a game like this where Philadelphia really has nothing to lose, and I think they're going to put everything on the table, it's a very, very tough matchup for Washington. I think Philadelphia is going to need to match up defensively against this is going to have to match up defensively against this Washington team because honestly, if they play someone like Tyler Heineke at quarterback, you should only let up 14 or less points. You should do what Carolina did last week against Haskins. Force turnovers because you know it's going to happen because the skill set of Tyler Heineke is still not there yet. But Philadelphia needs to really, 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 really have emotional attachment to this game. It's the first Sunday Night Football Week 17 game since the initial Sunday Night Football year of 2006 where one team is completely out of it. So that's going to be a very interesting scenario to see what Philadelphia does. Jay, Alex Smith?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the key for Washington is real simple. It's quarterback play. The Dwayne Haskins era, and I'll let Joe, step on the grave when it's his turn here. But it is officially. I
got a shovel for you. I got a shovel ready and waited for you.
It is officially over. We can do basically an entire segment on him, and whether it was his fault or the Washington's fault or a combination. But it's officially over, and I say that in the same tone as Dickens wrote, "quote Marley was dead to begin with. There was no doubt whatever about that." To open A Christmas Carol. I've been holding that literature reference all year. Ron Rivera pulled Haskins in the fourth quarter of Washington's Week 16 loss to Carolina after the second-year quarterback had thrown 2 picks, lost a fumble, and produced a 36.9 passer rating, leading the offense to only a pair of field goals as Washington barely sniffed the red zone all game. Taylor Heineke replaced Haskins. Alex Smith, as we all know, was a DNP coach's decision due to tightness in his calf. And that was basically almost at game time with that. Heineke went 12 of 19 for 137 yards. His 29-yarder to J.D. McKissick was Washington's only touchdown of the day. Worked out to an almost 103 passer rating. Heineke, like Kyle Allen, played for Rivera at Carolina last season, so he is familiar with the offense. And it would seem that Rivera has some confidence in the third-year pro out of Old Dominion. But as we all know, Washington's best chance to beat the Eagles and claim the NFC East is with Alex Smith under center. Since becoming the starter in Week 11, Smith's completed almost 65% of his passes. He's committed just 3 turnovers, and most importantly, he's led Washington to 4 wins in his 5 starts. Rivera's called Smith's leadership and experience invaluable, along with his ability to protect the ball and get it into the hands of his playmakers. The consistency of Smith's play is what Rivera said the offense has missed most while the quarterback's been recovering from that calf strain over the last couple of weeks. And here's the quote. The clarity in which he speaks to the guys, the way he puts his little emphasis on specific things when he's calling the play, and the confidence and swagger he has as a veteran guy. He tells the guys when he calls the play, he'll say, hey, look, you've got this. If you see that, run this. He'll give the guys a little something to help them. I think that really helps those guys as well, end quote. Smith was very close to playing against the Panthers. He was a full participant in Friday's practice. Rivera said he had an exceptional day, but Saturday morning, he still felt his calf grabbing at him a little bit. He was checked again by the medical staff before the game, but he was concerned about the injury bothering him, his mobility. And we saw with Daniel Jones what happens when a quarterback has no mobility, which led to him being inactive. Another wet week of rest and recovery. Rivera is, quote, optimistic about the opportunity, end quote, for Smith to play against the Eagles. Look, bottom line, guys, good quarterback play is the key to winning in the NFL in this day and age. Washington having the winner of our Comeback Player of the Year award taking the snaps Sunday night gives them the best chance to win.
Well, let me say something else about that. With the healthy Alex Smith and the legitimate threat under center, I know Antonio Gibson just came back last week, but he has 11 touchdowns this year and was sometimes the most explosive player on the field. I think he's that having a quarterback who people can, trust in throwing the football puts Gibson in a better position for this team.
Or just not making mistakes.
No, he doesn't make mistakes either. Absolutely. There are points, though, that the Philadelphia defense is going to be opportunistic because Alex Smith is still a quarterback that's not going to be always throwing the ball downfield. He'll be a check down quarterback if he needs to be a check down quarterback. However, you said Alex Smith running threats in any way, shape, or form. I'm not 100% sure that makes any sense there.
It's not about him being able to make plays with his legs. It's about him being mobile enough in the pocket to be able to sidestep the rush, step up, extend plays so that he can get the ball into the hands of the guys downfield. That's what I'm talking about in terms of being mobile for him.
I feel like he's mobile as much as Eli Manning was mobile his last year with the Giants.
You gotta remember, he was hurt. He was a very mobile quarterback before he had that leg injury. People forget about that.
I do remember that, but unfortunately, that leg injury has almost allowed it to be scrambling to be the last resort.
Maybe, but Joe, back me up here. I still think he's more mobile than Eli was.
Well, yeah.
Anybody is more mobile than Eli.
That's what I'm saying. Come on.
It's not setting the bar very high, so that's
fair.
All right, Joe, wrap it up for us.
I think that's the key the key to that game is two things: is Doug Peterson being able to get all those plays at the bottom of the sheet, the triple options and the throwbacks and the this and the that. Throw everything you can at him and see how many points he can score. Jalen Hurts is going to a lot. He can do a lot of different things. They can throw to him. They can do option. They can do a lot of different things to try to confuse this very good defensive front of Washington, because that obviously is their strength. So you're going to need a way to move around in that and a way to get away from that. If Alex Smith is in the Daniel Jones mode of the last couple of weeks where he can't move and he can't run, I think it's a detriment. I think they should play the other kid until something happens to the point where we need to have a change up here or I need to put somebody else in, because after having a week to game plan for him, it's a whole nother world than him walking in and against a Carolina team that was 4-whatever. We're not talking about suddenly him coming off the bench and beating, the 40. That's the key to this thing too is, does Fletcher Cox play? Who plays in these games? Who doesn't? It's nice to have division rivals. That's why I think the Cowboys-Giants game is the same thing. There's nothing better than to be able to knock the Cowboys out of the playoffs. In Dallas, there's nothing better than to beat us. Even if you're not going to get in, you want to put yourself in that position. And so anything can happen in this game. I think Doug Peterson's a good coach for this type of game because he likes all that trick stuff. He likes all this. Let's run this way. Let's run this way. Let's try different things. Let's go for two. Let's go for it on fourth down. He goes for it on fourth down as it is most of the time, as does Rivera. It could be a very, very fun game.
I think it will be.
And obviously, I think it's going to be very close. Philadelphia defense is awful, but again, it depends on who's going to be playing quarterback for Washington and exactly what's in that playbook also and how much time you have to prepare. So, it's a shame what's happened in Washington as far as the Haskins thing, but I hope The only thing I hope is somebody in this league looks back and realizes these one-year quarterbacks that play at these schools, and I went back and looked. The year he had, Ohio State was 13-1. They beat Purdue. They lost to Purdue. They beat Michigan State by 1 point in double overtime. They beat some other teams. They had J.K. Dobbins on that team, who was the star of that team. And if you can look at the average time that Haskins had to throw the ball, it was 5 or 6 seconds standing behind that Ohio State line, playing teams like Tulane and all these things. So you can't take a one-year quarterback that has one read on every play, that has all the time in the world to do what he has to do. I know a guy who goes to all the Ohio State games, and they said about Haskins when it's coming out, extremely accurate as long as he doesn't have to move his feet. He can't throw on the run to save his life. He doesn't run well either. So you took a guy and put him in the NFL after playing 1 year in college. And I don't care that he won a bowl game. I'm watching the Mayonnaise Bowl right now. Does anybody care if Wisconsin wins today and you're going to pick that guy because he had 300 yards rushing in the bowl game? Who cares? It's not the same. College football and the NFL is completely different. And
especially
you
at the quarterback position.
I texted Rabbi the other day and I said, they're talking about the Jets picking second and taking Fields from Ohio State.
God, no.
You can't do that. You can't just automatically take the next quarterback and go, look, he won 6 games in his year at Ohio State and they scored 55 points against who? Against a very down league. You also have to look at the league. Jay and you and I have had this conversation a lot, Jay. It's not so much the division these guys play in. It's the year that they play in that division. We talked about Mark Sanchez. He was great in the Pac-12 or 10 or whatever it was at the point, but Oregon State wasn't any good. Oregon hadn't become
Oregon
top.
Yep.
You play in an Arizona team. You play in a Colorado team. Those teams are nothing that year. They play teams that are down in those years, and they say, "Oh, look how well he did." And the rest of the team had something to do with it too. You had a couple wide receivers that are still playing in the NFL. You had offensive linemen that are very good. You had a great defense.
Yeah.
Clay Matthews, all those guys that came out of those places.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for Ohio State. If you think about it, I believe, Rabbi, correct me if I'm wrong, Haskins' big year at Ohio State, I believe there was a Bosa on the other side of the line wrecking havoc.
Oh, there was a Bosa. There was a Young on the other side of the line.
There you go. So, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, everybody talks about it. And I got to tell you, Joe, I got brothers and friends who are Jets fans, and they're losing their minds over Trevor Lawrence, and they're hitting me up about, so we're going to take Justin Fields. So I'm like, no, don't take Justin Fields. He's going to be the same. He's going to have the same problems that Haskins has. And I keep telling them, watch film on the kid Wilson out of BYU. Granted, he did not play, ridiculous competition either. But when I watch film on him, he at least seems to have a better grasp of what's required of a quarterback at the next level.
Well, before we continue on here, that's not the reason why Haskins got released. The reason why Haskins got released is because
the major reason.
No, the major reason that Haskins got released is he thought he was better than he played, and he was not a Ron Rivera guy, and he wasn't really ready to be an NFL player, let alone an NFL quarterback. His maskless strip club bowl is one of the reasons why he's in this position. And then when he goes on Sunday and says, it is what it is in terms of your performance, no, you don't play like that. And the only reason he ended up even saving this much face is him saying, I need to be better at the quarterback position, in something he probably worked with his agent and his PR firm on, and then immediately fired said agent because they couldn't get him a team on waivers. So Dwayne Haskins deserves everything he gets. I don't think it should be an indictment on Justin Fields on what happens, but I don't think Justin Fields is going to be that number 2 level quarterback. I think he needs to be worked as a backup, like every Ohio State quarterback.
And you know what, and Rabbi, you take one look at the game film that he put up against Indiana in the Big Ten title game, and if you're an NFL personnel guy, if that doesn't give you pause, I don't know what will.
The other thing,
that was amazing.
The other thing, guys, is it shows you how important these interviews are and all these other things, because these are the things that the media guys don't say. Like, they go to the combine, they show up and either they're surprised because they never actually watched any game film of the guy, or they go to pro days and all they get is the glowing recommendation from the head coach who has to say nice things. What's he going to say?
Pro days are a setup, and we both know it, Joe.
So the guys like Tom Kaplan, the guys like Ozzie Newsome, guys stuff that sit there who know how to ask the question in that 20-minute interview at the combine, that know how to go then interview the coaches, that have friends who worked at those places and get to talk. You find out about a Haskins that doesn't have a great work ethic, or he's been coddled all his life like Darnold, or whatever the story is. You know where you got to start with a guy like that. They brought in Doug Williams to work with him, and I went back and looked and go, so he was a year old when Doug Williams won the Super Bowl. I have a feeling when he walked in the room and he said, "Hi, I'm Doug Williams," he said, "Yeah, who's that guy?" I mean, there's no reason for him to have any reverence towards anybody because he doesn't seem like he's that guy. He doesn't seem like he's a historical NFL guy that can't wait to get in the league.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the Doug Williams thing, Joe. Doug Williams had a comment in the Sports Illustrated article, the Sports Person of the Year, and the article that they wrote on Patrick Mahomes. And Williams was pleasantly surprised that when he met Mahomes knew exactly who Doug Williams was and exactly what Doug Williams meant to this league when he was a player. And he recognized that it's guys like Doug Williams and Warren Moon and others before them that are the reason why a quarterback like Mahomes is not only more accepted by NFL personnel people, but sought after by NFL people. And the fact that a guy like Haskins doesn't know that, to me, I mean, if that's not a red flag that this guy has no clue, not only how to play at the NFL level, but act at the NFL level, like you said, he's been coddled. He doesn't care what came before him. He's all about himself. I hope he manages to resurrect his career, only for the sake. I hate to see, somebody get kicked to the curb that badly and not recover from it. But I don't have a lot of high hopes for him because unless he's a leopard who changes his spots in terms of his work ethic, he needs to get humble. And until he does, he's not going anywhere.
It's completely in his hands at this point. This will be the first time in his life he'll be the only one who'll be able to change this.
Yep.
There's not absolutely else come running because Andy Reid doesn't need another quarterback. There's no more Tony Dungy's in the league. There's no more. He needs somebody. He's going to have to be the reason people give him another.
Yeah.
Not the other way around. And then I look back at his career at Ohio State. You know who he didn't beat out his first year there was J.T. Barrett.
That's right.
He's not even in the NFL. So you played behind a guy who you couldn't beat out, who's not even playing in the NFL, and then you show up and you're supposed to be.
And that guy was beaten out by a guy who's no longer in the NFL, and Cardell Jones.
Exactly.
It's why I said to you, Rabbi, I can't remember the last time I trusted an Ohio State quarterback.
Before we get to Ohio State quarterbacks and the history of how shitty they are, and also, I'm glad Joe didn't pull a Booger McFarland and really go on the culture of quarterbacks out there. It was actually some interesting comments, and we could talk about that some other time. But let's move on because we have a lot more football to talk about with teams that actually are good. Let's talk wild card. In the AFC, there are, and I did extensive research on this because I wanted to make sure you understood what was going on. In the AFC, there are 4 playoff spots still left to round out the field and 5 teams in the mix. You have the Titans and the Colts, who are still going to the AFC South as well. The surprising 10-5 Dolphins, the reigning best team in the AFC who could still get the playoff boot, and the Ravens, and the equally as surprising 10-5 Browns, who ran into that buzzsaw known as the New York Jets to put them in this spot. Right now, all of these teams except the Colts are winning in this Sunday, but one falter from anybody besides the Colts, and they could get in, and one falter from the Colts, and everyone else gets in. I'll test you guys later on this stuff. So, Joe, out of all of these 5 teams, who's going to be out after Sunday?
I was sitting yesterday reading a lot of this stuff, and it's when I became extremely disappointed in Jay's team because I really think after what happened last year in the last game of the season, and you would think that this rivalry would be that strong because I know how badly we would play against any team and how much we would want to knock out anybody no matter how badly we were playing. I was just a little disappointed that you guys weren't going to. I mean, I understand maybe Roethlisberger not playing, but to sit back then and say, oh, and there's the guys that may not play also because we don't have to, was a little disappointing. So you sort of give that game, because I thought Cleveland really oversold themselves after beating the Giants to, oh, look how great we are. This is the first year we've won 10 games. This is the first year we've done this. And everyone said, oh, they're going to make the playoffs. And you're like, well, you still need to beat 2 teams to get in because it's a rough year in the AFC. You got to win 11 games. So I thought that would be the point where they would have to play at least a mediocre Pittsburgh team who just doesn't like them, and they put enough pressure on themselves, Cleveland, that they may stumble at this point and lose this game. So right now I put Indianapolis as the team that may not make it. And the game that's middle there, as you list the possibilities of things that have to happen, the one that's still up in the air is that Miami-Buffalo game, because how hard, is Buffalo going to pull a Pittsburgh and not play Allen and not play Diggs and not play a bunch of guys, or are they going to play everybody? They're going to play hard. Are they so new at this that they want to win as many games as they can and be as strong as they can going into the playoffs, which I believe is the case, except Miami plays everybody tough. And Miami always comes up with, the Raider game and the other games that they win out of nowhere. Last week with the long pass and the face mask penalty and all kind, maybe the greatest completion ever in the history of the NFL. The guy throwing to somebody couldn't see, just kind of knew because I'm so smart that there's somebody over there.
He is an Ivy League graduate.
Yeah, he's an Ivy League graduate, and give him credit. He obviously knew where everybody was on the field. So I think that's the key to this whole scenario is what happens in that game. I think everybody else takes care of business. I think beating Jacksonville and all that stuff happens. Jacksonville will play them tough for the first half. And Indy's got to be beside themselves for losing to you last week, Jay, losing Pittsburgh after having such a big lead in the beginning.
Yep, and biggest comeback in the Tomlin era.
And so how does that affect them? They do have a veteran quarterback who's been through a lot of losing, so he might understand you got to put that behind you, and here's our chance. And, again, we can only count – we should have only had ourselves, but we didn't. But I think that Miami-Buffalo game would be, if I had to only choose one game to watch to see how the rest of the thing was going to be determined, instead of being able to watch all 4 games at once. I would pick watching that game to see how everything lays out. But I think Indy's the one who winds up being the loser.
Well, Rabbi, I think Joe perfectly, rolled the ball out and set me up here because the team I'm looking at is the Miami Dolphins playing Buffalo in Week 17. To me, the Dolphins are in the strangest or most interesting, depending on how your mind works, spot in the race for that final AFC playoff entry. If they beat the Bills, they get in, though losses by either Baltimore, Cleveland, or Indy can get them in as well, as you said. The problem here is that all of these scenarios involve a team that also has something to play for. The Ravens and Browns need to win to ensure they stay in their current playoff slots. The Colts need to win to even have a chance to get in. I mean, if you think about this, the Ravens are facing a Bengals team they beat easily in Week 5, 27-3, and that's when Cincy still had Joe Burrow playing quarterback. Facing anyone else in quarterback for the Bengals, and with all their weapons intact, should be a walkover for the Ravens. The Browns facing my Steelers, who blew them out 38-7 in Week 6, but the AFC North's champs are sitting Ben Roethlisberger, among others. So the Browns, with all of their wide receivers back, should have a better than even chance to get a W, which they'll need in order to keep pace with division rival Baltimore for playoff seeding. Colts facing a Jaguars team that has already clinched both the worst record in the NFL this season as well as a number 1 overall draft pick. Other than the pride of professional football players hoping to have a job next season, either in Duval County or elsewhere, the Jags have 0 to play for. Like most of Jacksonville's opponents this season, the Colts should merely have to show up to get the win. And that leaves the Dolphins trying to secure their spot. They're currently the AFC's number 5 seed on the road at the AFC East champs, who will still have an opportunity to claim the number 2 seed in home field until the AFC title game. And I have to believe that the Bills would rather have the Browns, who are currently the number 7 seed as of now, and possibly the Steelers, the number 3 seed, come to Buffalo, where the Bills are 6-1 overall and won their last 4. for the Dolphins, for me, it comes down to this. Can Tua play to his enormous potential in a must-win game? He did it at Alabama. How short is his leash going to be if the Dolphins are trailing at any point in the second half? Does Ryan have one more Fitzmagic game left in him this season if Miami needs the NFL's best reliever to bail out their rookie starter? Will Buffalo have their A game? And it's a legitimate thing here, as Joe mentioned. Will they leave that A game in the locker room on a day where percentages say they'll stay exactly where they are as the AFC East number 2 seed? It's a lot of ifs, and I think there are too many of them arrayed against the Fins. I think the other teams have much easier roads to get the Week 17 wins that they need, and I do think Buffalo is going to go all out to keep the number 2 seed and ensure that they have home field throughout rounds 1 and 2. That means, to me, guys, Miami goes home as the AFC's last team out.
Well, let me say this. If Ryan Fitzpatrick comes into the game on Sunday, we'll enter Sandman play, and it'll be like everybody on the bench.
No, because Mariano Rivera still has the rights to that in perpetuity. I'm sorry.
They should have the rights to that in perpetuity, but I think that's for one day. Lent it out to.
Maybe if Fitzmagic was still a Jet, maybe, but he plays for the enemy now. No, not happening.
I think the choice is a little bit more surprising. I kind of think Tennessee is going to be the last team out for a bunch of reasons. Number one, I did not like Tennessee's performance last week against Green Bay. Yes, it's Green Bay who's going to probably be the best team in the NFC, but it was a game that was built for Derrick Henry and built for at least a small Ryan Tannehill performance, and they didn't do it. They didn't even look like they belonged on the same field, and that's a 10-win team right there. And again, 10-6 might get you out of the playoffs this year. I think the Texans have prime upset potential for multiple reasons. Number one, the Texans are coming off one of their worst losses in their franchise history against the Bengals, the same Bengals that you said had no shot to beat the Ravens on Sunday, and I kind of agree with you. But I think the Texans played Tennessee to an overtime game the last time they played, and if it weren't for some questionable Romeo Crennel coaching, they probably would have won that game. And also because of that game, J.J. Watt gave one of the best post-game speeches that we've seen all year, basically saying there are a whole lot of people that watch us and invest their time and their money into buying our jerseys and a bunch of beep, Watt said after the loss, and they care about it and they care every single week. We're in week 16 and we're 4-11, and there's fans that watch this game that show up to the stadium that put in the time and energy and effort and care about this. So if you can't go out there and you can't work out, you can't show up time, you can't practice, you can't want to go out there and win, you shouldn't be here, because this is a privilege. This is the greatest job in the world, and you get to go out and play a game. Now, those words from the second best Watt brother in NFL right now is definitely something to live by, and I think that's going to motivate the Texans a ton. They have a quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who I think has a lot of pride, and they still have a decent wide receiving core. I think this is a team that's going to be motivated in week 17, and I think they actually pull off the upset. And then if you look at all of the other scenarios, you're right about, I think the Dolphins will beat the Bills because I think they have a lot to play for in this game, and I think the Bills will understand. First of all, they play them tough anyway, regardless. Yep. They've always played each other tough. And I think the Bills understand that they're probably going to stay exactly where they are. And even if they had to go to Pittsburgh in the second round game, there are no fans in Pittsburgh. I think they have the chance to win there anyway. They won there last year, albeit with Duck Hodges as quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pittsburgh plays Cleveland really tough. I think Pittsburgh is kind of going to play loose on Sunday. I think Mason Rudolph coming in a game where he has nothing to lose against the team who he's probably very motivated to play against after what happened last year is actually going to be a good thing. But I still think Cleveland wins. They have more talent than Pittsburgh on this given day. Ravens are going to beat the Bengals. That's pretty much obvious. Colts are going to beat the Jaguars. So I think everything happens. I think Tennessee is actually the last team out on Sunday. I know this is a little bit of a stretch, but in a year where anything can happen, where we have the possibility in a 17 playoff where we added a seed to have an 11-5 team not make the playoffs, to have that happen is honestly insane.
Par for the course for the year, right, Rabbi? Par for the course.
Damn right it is. All right. In the NFC, it's a little bit easier. It's 3 teams for 2 spots. The Rams and Cardinals face each other in a game that looks so much better a week ago. And the winner of that game is automatically in the playoffs. The Bears are win and in as well. as they take on their old rivals in the Green Bay Packers. But a Cardinals loss gives us playoff Mitch Trubisky, and get your wallets out, ladies and gentlemen. There's no line that's good enough for me to bet on the other team. Oh boy. I ask again, Joe, the simple question: who's out?
I think it's the Rams. I think it's the Rams because even though he's very inconsistent and has played poorly at times this year, without Jared Goff, the other guy who's had no snaps. It's not like it's been a rotation. It's not like he's been finished up with games. Jared Goff is the quarterback for this team, and without him, again, no matter how inconsistent he's been, but they also lost their top running back, which they've been losing week after week. They keep losing Cam Akers, and now they lost Henderson. They lost a couple of different guys. So I'm not sure where McVay goes. If you don't have a quarterback who you really know and trust and who's gotten in all the reps and in a very complicated offense, I don't see how you simplify it without having a running game. It's a very difficult task for him to come together. Now, Arizona, you told me just before this started that Kyler Murray is going to play. So that changes a lot of different things because he's going to be able to move the ball. He's going to be able to do a lot of different things, even against this Ram defense, which I think people have figured out with the Rams defense is if you run the ball at Aaron Donald and you get rid of the ball quickly or you have a very mobile quarterback like they do, that they can be beaten. Obviously half the field is gone because you really can't throw against one side of the Rams defense. But I think that there's enough weapons on Arizona that if Murray plays and he's healthy, I think puts a lot of pressure on the Rams to put some points up. And I really don't know where they get much offense from without a running game and without their quarterback who they've played 16 games with. So I just think that their fall from grace is all on Goff's shoulders. He's played horribly at times this year. He's played, state football. He got 4 turnovers in one half at one point at a game earlier this year. So I just think that they're the ones who are going to – and it'll probably help McVay, actually. It'll probably help this team to have this little fall from grace and to realize that they need a little bit more depth in their running game and maybe they need a little bit more depth at their quarterback game.
Yeah, I think we talked about Jared Goff in those last 2 weeks, Joe, that we talked about Jared Goff in those last 2 weeks. He's a different quarterback, and the way he's really kind of screwed up this Rams team and really played really bad is the reason why we're in this situation, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, if you look at all three of these teams, the Rams are the ones who shot themselves in the foot the most. I don't expect the Bears to go, to beat Green Bay this weekend. I don't care what kind of numbers, Mitch Trubisky puts up. I don't care that the Bears have been scoring 30 plus points a game over the last 3+ weeks or whatnot. I think they're going to get in as an 8-8 team. And if it is true that Kyler Murray is playing, then I agree with you guys. Arizona's winning this game. I mean, we all know the Rams blew their best shot to get in by losing to the Jets in Week 15. I mean, think about it. They beat the Jets. They're 10-5 coming into this final weekend, and they've locked up a spot because they'd have a 2-game lead on both the Bears and the Cardinals. Even coming into this week, if they had managed to beat the Hawks, they would have been in. Had the Bears lost to the Jaguars, they'd have been in. Had the Cardinals beaten the Niners, they'd have been in. None of those things happened. You alluded to John Wolford, Joe. Kid's never taken a step, at all in the regular season. I mean, yeah, look, Sean McVay said all the right things. Quote, John's done a great job preparing himself all year. You watch in the way that he's worked it. I know there's confidence from the coaches and teammates, and guys will need to rally around him. But we're excited about the opportunity John will have to lead the offense this week. What the hell else is he going to say? Even if they do manage to re-sign Blake Bortles, who was Goff's backup last year and knows the offense.
Which they did, by the way, I believe.
Okay, is it official? Okay, it wasn't when I was doing my research on this last night. But, I mean, he's going to have what? Less than a full week of practice. Granted, it's an offense he's familiar with. The guy's barely played all year. And granted, does Blake Bortles give you a better shot to win a game over a guy who's never taken a regular season snap in the NFL? Yeah. But remember, it's Blake Bortles. So, I don't see the Rams winning this game. And at the end of the day, Kyler Murray, if he's healthy enough to play his game, Cardinals just have better skill position players. And look, yeah, the Rams defense has Aaron Donald. They have Jalen Ramsey. But Jalen Ramsey can only cover Larry Fitzgerald or DeAndre Hopkins. He can't cover both. Does Donald have a chance to wreak havoc in the Cardinals' backfield? Sure. But he's the most devastating defensive lineman in the NFL. But I think Kingsbury's scheme and Murray's talents give them a way to get around him and get by him. So, I definitely think it's the Rams. The Bears are going to get in no matter what, because one of these teams knocking each other out means the Bears get in no matter what. Rabbi, I don't see a different scenario. Do you?
Well, the Bears can, if the Cardinals win, the Bears still have a possibility of getting out, because the head-to-head between all three would get the Rams in. So there's a chance that the Cardinals and Rams can both get in. Okay, I'm actually going to make the case for the Rams. First of all, I think the Bears are probably going to lose to the Packers, but I think the Bears have been a completely different, a more confident team over the last few weeks. We'll get to that in the next segment, kind of with the Packers. I think the Bears are going to play a very good game at Soldier Field. I think Matt Nagy has kind of experienced a little bit of a renaissance in play calling, guys. And I think this is a good shot for the Bears, even if they lose, to kind of build a little momentum to a possible matchup with the New Orleans Saints in the first round. I do think they get in, because I honestly think the Cardinals are going to beat the Rams.
Well,
I'm sorry. I think the Rams. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I think the Rams are going to beat the Cardinals,
even with Murray playing.
Even with Murray playing, and here's why: I trust Sean McVay's scheme. I trust Sean McVay, who's kind of had the avalanche of Jared Goff, or the weight of Jared Goff, who's played so inconsistent over his time in LA. I can't even believe they got to his Super Bowl with Goff as quarterback. I know they played really his best game as a pro is the game he played against the Saints in the NFC Championship. And even then, he didn't even look like an NFL quarterback in the first quarter of that game. I honestly trust McVay's play calling. Walford is a guy who has played professional football before. I know stepping into an NFL field is completely different, but 2020, I know there's no Cooper Kupp for him to throw to as a slot guy, but 2020, I know this team hasn't looked good in the last few weeks and has lost to the Jets, but 2020. But here's the real reason. I think Cliff Kingsbury is the worst coach in the NFL outside of Adam Gase. I think Cliff Kingsbury has his air raid offense, performs it well, knows this is the way the future of the NFL is, but his in-game decision is one of the worst that I have ever seen in my entire life. He doesn't know how to call a play inside of the red zone. He doesn't know how to use a 70% Murray. And honestly, that's what he is right now. He's lost a little bit of his running ability. He's a guy who's not going to give you 50 yards a game on the ground now. And with that said, you can prepare for the Cardinals. You can put a guy on Hopkins. You can put multiple guys on Hopkins, and you can put one guy on Fitzgerald, because Fitzgerald will lose one-on-one matchups. I think this is a prime way for the Rams, who Vegas is still favoring in this game with John Walford as quarterback. Keep that in mind. I think there is a way for the Rams to win this game, and I think the Cardinals, who have overstepped their boundaries this year as a team, I think 8-8 in this season is impressive after being near the bottom of the league in the last few years. They were 5-11 last year, I believe, or 6-10. I think this is a step that the Cardinals are just not ready to take. All right,
well, just remember this, Rabbi. No Darrell Henderson. No Andrew Whitworth. Cam Akers may be back, but he's not 100%. Like you said, no Cooper Kupp. If Walford is the quarterback and not Bortles, and even if it's Bortles, they do not have a whole host of playmakers to make plays against Arizona.
That Arizona defensive line's good too. And if this kid has never seen a defense against them because he's playing 7-on-7 in practice, that might be a rude awakening too. Because they'll start coming at him from all directions to see. It's a very simple game plan on defense for Arizona. Is you're going to force this kid to throw the ball, obviously. So you're going to take away the non-existent running game and force this kid into long third downs or whatever you can do, and you're going to pressure him like crazy until he proves he can do it. And that'll be the whole game.
Yeah, and Rabbi, and this is
that's all you'll have to watch.
Yeah, and there's one other thing to think of here is that Brandon Staley, who is the defensive coordinator for the Rams defense is a lot better than people think it is. It's the number 3 scoring defense in the NFL. And whereas Wade Phillips was a bend but don't break, Staley is going to have to come after people. And if he can't make plays for that Rams defense against the offense of the Cardinals, Rams aren't going anywhere. I'm sorry.
That's why Kyler Murray's health is key to this one too, just like the Daniel Jones thing, because playing against Russell Wilson is different than playing against Kyler Murray, is different than playing against
Jared Goff,
Lamar Jackson, and the Giants. Murray can get 5 yards anytime he wants.
Yeah.
He never gets sacked. He can get 3 or 5 yards anytime he wants. Skips out of bounds. Never takes a hit. Knows how to slide from his baseball background. You can't touch him when you're out there. It's very, very difficult to do anything on him. So I think that's going to play a big part of it, because it's tough to rush him as a passer as you normally do, because one guy doesn't get him. Aaron Donald can't be the only guy that breaks free and sacks Kyler Murray. He's going to go one way or the other, and that's going to be it. And I think that's the key to this whole thing is how good does this one quarterback stand up under pressure, and what can they contain Kyler Murray, and do they have to, because can he run or not?
Once again, comes down to quarterback play on both sides of the ball.
I have a question for you both. CJ Beathard, quarterback or not quarterback in this league, starter-wise?
I honestly, I don't know if the guy is a full-time, week in, week out starter in this league. Is he in the right system for him? Yes. The system works around him.
For San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah. He's a game manager. He can make plays when he has playmakers. But, he
didn't have any playmakers last week. 13 for 22, 182, 3 touchdowns. You're not telling me John Walford, who I know doesn't have as many playmakers. San Francisco has duct tape on that team, and they won pretty nice and comfortably there.
Here's the difference, Rabbi. Walford has not played an NFL game at NFL speed, and this is going to be his first action. And if you don't think that they're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at him to see if he can take it, you're not paying attention to how the NFL goes after rookie quarterbacks. Beathard is not a rookie. He may not have the skill set that is ever going to get him above a tier 2 starter in this league. But if he has to play, and he's played plenty, he's in the system that works for him. He knows it in and out. They scheme and they play call to put him in the best position for him to succeed in that system. Running game does what it does. When he has Kittle, he has a playmaker.
Which he did.
Granted. And when he has, guys on the outside, he does a good job of getting them the ball. Is he the guy I want to pin my hopes for the next 5 years on if I want to be a Super Bowl contender? No, I will still bet more on the side of Jimmy Garoppolo in that scenario, because when Garoppolo is healthy, I still think he can be minimum a tier 2 quarterback in this league. Beathard is the right guy to be a backup. And in this league, we have seen over the last 2-3 years how important having your number 2 quarterback be a guy who can step in and you not lose that much of a drop-off. You saw how the Cowboys didn't lose that much when Andy Dalton had to step in for Dak Prescott. The flip side of it is we saw how much of a drop-off there even was from Daniel Jones to Colt McCoy. He's not going to be a guy I'm going to sign to a multi-million-dollar contract and bank my Super Bowl hopes on him. But if I'm looking for a solid number 2 quarterback who I know can step in the middle of a game if my starter goes down and at least keep us afloat, yeah.
No,
I was just going to say CJ Beathard is is not a quarterback, really, not as good of a quarterback as anybody should think. But at least Jay put me in my place with the 6-minute answer on that question, which is perfectly fine. Joe, do you have anything final to say here?
I was saying is correct. If you have a backup that knows the system and has been there and has played in games, he's the guy to keep. Just like the Giants kept David Carr all those years.
Yeah.
Just you want a solid guy who's a veteran, who's not looking to win a job, who knows why he's there and can step in and manage a game without trying to prove anything. And that's what happens with a lot of these younger guys that you have as backups. That's why the guy in LA scares the hell out of me, because he may think he has a chance to win a job, and that's not what you want. You want a guy who's going to take the 180 yards and to hell with his fantasy stats and win a ball game instead of trying to throw for 350.
Right. I mean, Rabbi, you made the point when you were rattling off the stats. The 180 yards is not the stat. The 3 touchdown passes
is the stat, of course.
That's the stat. Does he get the team down the field? When he's in a position to make a play, does he make the play? He doesn't have to pile up the stats. He just has to make the play when you need him to make a play. And Beathard does that in that system.
All right, before we get to nightfall, let's move on to our home field advantage segment. From the bottom of the bottom to the top of the top. The Seattle Seahawks, Green Bay Packers, and New Orleans Saints are vying for the coveted number 1 seed in the NFC and the right to enjoy January 9th and 10th off, while the other 2 will host wildcard games, as well as 7-9 or 6-10 teams. So what's the big deal about that? Green Bay has a win-it-in scenario, and the Packers and Seahawks. Green Bay has a win-it-in scenario. A Packers loss and Seahawks and Saints win means the NFC will go through NOLA, and a Seahawks win and the other 2 losing gives the 12th man the NFC HFA. Got it? Now that was a little bit more tougher to actually get through than the other. Hey, out of the 3.
Rabbi, as Top would say to you if we were in the studio, enunciate.
Enunciate. Jay, who needs it out of the 3 the most?
Look, as I said in the NFC Last Team Out segment, I honestly don't see the Packers losing to the Bears. So I think the NFC will go through the frozen tundra that is Lambeau Field. Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams shredded the Titans in a wee bit of snow. And those 2, as you've said, Rabbi, are firing on all cylinders. The running game's been solid of late, as has the offensive line. I don't see any of that changing this week. So unless Mr. Murphy shows up for lunch, this is going to be a moot point by about 4:30-ish on Sunday. I honestly don't think Seattle needs the home field. Their defense, led by Jamal Adams and Bobby Wagner, is finally rounding into form in time for the playoffs, giving the Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett offense a full partner on the other side of the ball. To me, if any of the NFC's top teams can go into Green Bay and steal a win, I like the Seahawks to do it. So all that being said is why I think the Saints need home field more than either the Packers or the Seahawks. Granted, New Orleans is finally, rounding into the deep, well-rounded team I picked to rep the NFC in Super Bowl 55 back on our kickoff show in September. But the last thing a Saints team with a still not quite 100% Drew Brees and a still recovering Michael Thomas need is to try to go into Green Bay in January and win a playoff game.
Joe?
Saints need it.
Yeah, I think Green Bay is the strongest team in this group, but their biggest weakness is their defense. And the best way to slow down everybody, as we know, is in a little bit of snow, as you say. Everybody's like, oh, this game is built for Derrick Henry, except that that's all they had to do was put 5 or 6 guys on the line and stop Derrick Henry, because everybody else is slipping and sliding and not used to playing in the snow. And, you'll be able to get some pressure on guys because you have 5 or 6 guys at the line. This Green Bay team is quite remarkably unstoppable at this point, with their offensive line playing well, with the offense that they run with their multiple motions, and Devontae Adams just being everybody in the way that they showed. He doesn't get himself in trouble with his hands. He does everything with his feet. He's obviously a top receiver in this league. But the weakness of this Green Bay team is their defense, and the way to equalize against any of these other weapons, the Metcalfs and the Drew Brees and the different combinations there, is to get them up there and get them in some bad weather. Now, we know that some teams have gone in there and done well against them, but so it's not a guarantee. But I still say that they're the ones who really could use the help to get there. I agree with you 1,000%, Jay. New Orleans can't win outside that dome.
No.
Because they need that carpet. even going up to Seattle in the rain, if it's raining or whatever, is going to hurt them. In a way, Green Bay needs this because that's what protects their defense is a little bit of bad weather, unless you're going to go try to score 50 points against everybody, which they could do. But I think they would much rather play at home and put that pressure on the other teams.
I kind of no, I disagree. I think it's here's the thing. I think New Orleans can actually win a tough game in January because I think they're going to depend on the guy that's really carried this team all year, and that's Mr. 6 touchdowns himself, Alvin Kamara. I think Kamara against even one of these two teams can really provide another dimension and can kind of get this team down the field. Brees is not going to throw the ball 20 yards down the field anymore. He can't do it. It's pretty obvious. But I think he can throw enough and be a Peyton Manning-like game manager, as Peyton was when they won this Super Bowl 5 years ago, that I think that's how they're going to win. And you don't need to be in a dome to be a game manager. I think not being in the dome, even for a second-round matchup against Seattle, who I did pick to make the Super Bowl this year, I think it might actually not be a terrible thing for New Orleans to be away from home. I think Green Bay is still a team that does need home field advantage, but they don't need it as much as the Seattle Seahawks do. I think as much as I just said, New Orleans can win in Seattle, I don't think Seattle can win in New Orleans because Russell Wilson is going to do too much whenever he leaves Seattle. I think Russell Wilson is going to try to throw for 400 yards no matter what the situation is in the snow, and he will turn the ball over, kind of like he did in the big game earlier this year against Arizona and did in some bad games too. I think Seattle needs to play their style of football, and I don't think they are able to play their style of football really anywhere. If you saw when they played the LA Rams in Week 10, they were not comfortable, and that's a stadium where anyone is comfortable because there's no real home field advantage this year in SoFi Stadium. Yeah. I think the Seattle Seahawks need home field the most out of these three teams. I think the other two, I can see Green Bay winning in New Orleans. They already have. I can see Green Bay winning in Seattle. They almost did in the Super Bowl 49 era. I think this is the best Aaron Rodgers we've seen. So I think Green Bay can do some stuff. I think we've seen this year with Seattle, they cannot really win against a good team unless it's on their terms.
Interesting.
All right. Yeah, I'm being the contrarian today. So when you see this video come out next week, I'm going to say, oh, no, that wasn't me. It was just somebody who was trying to provide a different angle. This is not what I actually believe.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. The CFP Semifinals are where they should be on New Year's Day, featuring 4 familiar foes. In the Rose Bowl, being played in Arlington, Texas, the world beaters of this college football season, the 11-0 Alabama Crimson Tide, will play the 10-1 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, coming into this game limping, to say the least, after a shellacking in the ACC title game against Clemson. Still, the Irish make their second CFP appearance, and it's the least out of the 4, if you can't believe that. And they're going to do it as almost 3 touchdown underdogs. No, we don't talk about gambling too much on this show, but if you tease both of the underdogs, you can get Ohio State plus 13.5, and you can get Notre Dame plus 25.5.
It's down to 19.5 as of Monday.
But you get the 6 points on a teaser, so you get 6 points more on each of them. So do what you want with your money. We're not promoting it, but this is something that you really should do. Anyway, let's be blunt, Jay. Is Alabama just this good? Do the Irish actually stand a chance?
It's funny, when you and I were figuring out how we were going to do this preview, and you said you wanted me to take the favorites, I said, thank you very much. Can I have another? Here's the thing, and no disrespect to the season that Notre Dame had this year. And yes, college football. By the way,
when someone says no disrespect, immediately disrespect follows every single time in the history of conversation.
No, it just means that, I can respect what they've done. It's not going to matter.
That's disrespect. There you go.
No, it's not. College football is much better when the Irish are relevant and in the national championship, contention picture. But I honestly don't see how they get past the Tide. As we alluded to the point spread, it's the largest in CFP playoff history. I mean, Alabama has a set of triplets on offense that remind me of Aikman, Irvin, and Smith when they were wrecking havoc for Dallas in the 90s. I mean, quarterback Mac Jones and wide receiver Devonta Smith are Heisman finalists and worthy of it. And running back Najee Harris probably should have been. I mean, think about this. Harris ran for 178 yards.
Harris, by the way, finished fifth on that ballot.
There you go. Yes, behind behind Trask. 178 yards on 31 carries, 2 touchdowns in the SEC title game win over Florida. And in a clear exhibition of how Bama's offense has evolved since the Irish last played them in the BCS title game in 2012, he caught 3 touchdowns. Jones, 33 of 43, 418 yards with 5 scores and 1 pick. Smith caught 15 balls for 184 yards and 2 TDs. The Tide basically played backyard football with the Gators in the SEC title game and held on to beat one of the best offenses they've seen all season. Notre Dame's offense is nowhere near as explosive as Florida's. The Irish will have to play in a perfect game on both sides of the ball to even a chance to keep the game competitive, let alone a shot to pull off the upset. Look, yes, Nick Saban's defense is nowhere near as dominant as it's been in years past. It's vulnerable, can give up points, but to beat the Crimson Tide, you have to outscore them in a shootout. Florida nearly did it. They just ran out of time. And no disrespect to Ian Book, but the Irish quarterback is not in the same universe as Gators quarterback Kyle Trask, who lit the Tide up for 408 yards and 3 touchdowns on 26 of 40. Look, Book's mobility and Notre Dame's use of their tight ends in the passing game could give Alabama's defense some trouble. But the Tide knows that the Irish wide receivers don't cause any defensive coordinators to lose sleep. If they can lock down Kyron Williams in the run game, the Irish will not be able to play the ball control, time possession, grinded out style of offense they need to be successful. And while the Tide defense struggled against the Gators, they've improved greatly since the second half of the season. 21 of their 32 sacks have come in the last 4 games, led by true freshman Will Anderson, 7. They got 5 of those sacks against Trask, which is probably the only positive defensive takeaway from the SEC title game. They'll need to do better against the Irish in that regard. Rushing Trask and rushing Book requires 2 different types of schemes. Not that Trask isn't mobile, but he isn't Book in terms of buying time in the pocket or being a threat to make a play with his legs. A controlled rush, what Alabama calls a mush rush, might be utilized against Notre Dame. Alabama needs to avoid losing rush and lane integrity to prevent Notre Dame from moving the chains. All of the above being said, Rabbi, unless the same Mr. Murphy I mentioned in our NFC home field segment shows up and messes with the Alabama offense, the Tide are going to roll, and it could get ugly for the Irish.
Okay, here we go. This is how I'm going to make the case. I'm going to make it. Number 1, I think Notre Dame has so much on the line to play for respect-wise. Here is just a list of the games that they have lost in big moments since 2000. 2001 Fiesta Bowl, 41-9 loss to Oregon State. Yes, Joe, Oregon State was relevant at one time. They had Chad Johnson and TJ Hushmanzada on that team.
That's right.
So that was a team that was a bad loss for them. 2006 Fiesta Bowl, 34-20 loss against Ohio State. Score not indicated of what actually had happened. 2007 Sugar Bowl, 41-14 loss to LSU. We mentioned the 2013 BCS national title game, 42-14 loss to Alabama. And most recently, the loss to Clemson in the CFP Semifinals, which was one of the worst losses I had ever seen, 30-3, wasn't even close. All that being said, if you are a good program and you have this much history against you, plus the Clemson loss in the ACC title game, and you're Brian Kelly, who has gotten Notre Dame back to a level of almost being there, you have to break through it sometime. The numbers indicate it. I think this is the time. Even though they're going up against one of the most so I mentioned they haven't done the Heisman yet. That'll be voted on January 5th, but they've released the ballot results. First team to have 3 top 5 Heisman candidates since the 60s, which is insane. This is one of the most prolific offenses that I've ever seen in college football history, led by your boy, Assistant of the Year, Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah.
I just have this feeling that Notre Dame is going to play their hardest. I do not think that this is going to be a blowout. If it is, I will eat my words. This is reminding me a lot of the first
toast
year.
in the bread.
Yeah, that's true. But I think this is reminding me a lot of the first year of the CFP playoff when Ohio State played Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Everybody and their mother picked Alabama. They were led by Blake Sims, a quarterback who was as not a name, kind of like how Mac Jones isn't a name. Mac Jones has not really played too many big-time opponents this year, obviously, except Georgia and Florida. Georgia's not what we thought they were, and Florida was, again, a scoring fest. Their defense is not the same defense that Alabama is used to in these types of situations. Alabama is basically predicated on we can outscore you because we have more weapons. But if Alabama doesn't bring anything close to their A game, kind of like they did against Ohio State that night, who brought their A-plus game, even though Cardell Jones was their quarterback, as we mentioned before, second Cardell Jones mentioned on the show, which will never ever happen again.
No, it will not.
I think Notre Dame has a shot to shock the world here. And if Notre Dame does, they will be back into prominence. I think even if they don't win, I think this game is a 2-touchdown or less game that is not decided in the second half, which I think most people will
you're saying take Notre Dame in the points, huh?
Oh, I'm definitely saying take Notre Dame in the points.
Not that we promote gambling on this show.
Not that we promote gambling on this show at any way, shape, or form. Not that we say go to FanDuel in New Jersey and place a bet if you want to. That's just you. But I think this game is close. I don't know why. Joe, finish us off.
Crazy. Jay said two things that kind of stick at me. Yeah, college football is better when Notre Dame is good, only because the money's better when Notre Dame is good.
Absolutely.
Because the games are good and NBC puts them on, and people want to see them, people want to go there, people want to do everything. So I don't think it makes that much of a difference whether they're all that competitive or not to make Notre Dame be good and watchable, because they're like a lot of teams where people just turn them on because it's Notre Dame. The second thing is if Trevor Lawrence, they would have 2 losses and they wouldn't be in this position.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
So that's kind of the key to this thing. You had to go to overtime to beat them without their quarterback, who is a stud. This is a legitimate guy who can play college football and is in the perfect scheme for him, who's on the perfect team for him. So they would have had 2 losses, and you would have had Texas A&M in this position instead, or somebody else, whoever it would have broken.
Would have been worse, by the way, I think, in my opinion.
Exactly. So I think that's the point that you have to look at this team is, look, I give them all the credit in the world for playing all the games, for joining the conference, for taking the opportunity to get in there and say, hey, this is our best chance to get into college football plays. Let's join a conference for a year, see how this goes. A lot of teams playing 5 games and 6 games and 8 games and not having championship games and having things rescheduled and moved around, and they've done a very good job. But I don't think they stand a chance. This team is just not built. We've always gone back with Notre Dame is, what are you going to do? Are you going to be scholar athletes, or are you going to be athletes that happen to show up at school? And, they've gone both directions. If you've ever talked to Ricky Waters, he didn't go to many classes, I'm sure. So there's a couple of guys out there that, have slipped through those cracks. And Brian Kelly is not exactly, the Jesuit priest either. So I think that they've kind of figured out a way to win some games here themselves relevant inside college football, but I don't think they've reached that level. And when you say you get an Alabama team who's not only playing like Alabama, but has the weapons that they have, that has half an NFL team playing on offense, legitimately half an NFL team playing on offense.
Yeah, it's going to be half an NFL team playing on offense when we get to 2021.
Yeah, so I just think that it's just too much of a task. Again, I give them all the credit in the world for taking the path they took, for doing what they did, for finishing games, for going out there and playing well. I like the quarterback. I think he's going to be good. I think he's a solid performer. I think he's a tough kid. I think he's come a long way since he's been there. I don't like Brian personally, but I think that just against that team and that coaching staff and the way that they play, they also see this as an opportunity to go out there and win by 20, 25, 30 points, especially towards the end of the game when Najee Harris starts breaking everything for 20, 30, 40-yard runs.
Oh, yeah. Let me say this, though, and I never thought I would say this. the depth of talent that Alabama has had offensively in the NFL over these last 4 or 5 years is insane. You have 3 legitimate starting running backs in Derrick Henry, the guy in New England, Harris, and God, I cannot remember the third one, but I had a third one, and somebody it'll come back to me in a second. But then, Jacobs from Las Vegas. And then you have the 2 wide receivers from Atlanta. You have Judy. You have the guy from Las Vegas as well, and Ruggs. This team is just Alabama is now an offensive powerhouse, and I give Nick Saban a lot of credit changing the path of this organization to being an offensive powerhouse. Now they just need quarterbacks to really do well in the NFL, which Tua is still on the way to doing. But the fact that they have a quarterback to lead them almost every single year just shows how good they are recruiting-wise and how good that they are in just almost everything else. However, this Alabama team needs to rely on their defense a little bit if they win this game and if they get to eventually a national title game, which we get to now when we talk about the Sugar Bowl. They have 2 very familiar foes, Clemson and Ohio State, as they're playing in the semifinal round for the 3rd time in 5 years. Clemson winning the last 2. Ohio State, a whopping 6 wins and 0 losses, has been one of the most controversial semifinal picks ever. And Clemson coach Dabo Swinney thought so, being the only coach in America to not even put Ohio State in his top 10 and putting him 11th. Sean alluded to this on our year-end show a couple of days ago. Swinney actually had a very good answer to this. He said, I would not put any team who hasn't played a full schedule in the top 10, and said, I think Ohio State has a very legitimate chance to beat us. You know what? He stuck to his convictions, and I give him credit for that. But, Jay, can Clemson get to their 3rd CFP championship in a row?
I know this is the rematch Ohio State's been waiting a year for, but they should really be careful for what they wish for. The Tigers are playing their best ball at the right time, unlike the Buckeyes. The Tigers have an entire season of play behind them, not just 6 games, as you mentioned. Clemson's offense is about as ridiculous as it gets. Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in the nation, and while his numbers are slightly less all-worldly than they were last season, but, there hasn't been a defense yet that seemed to have found a way to hold him in check. Since returning from his 2-game absence due to COVID-19, Lawrence has thrown for 920 yards and 5 TDs with only 2 picks. He shredded Notre Dame in the ACC title game, 25 of 36, 322 yards, 2 TDs, and 1 interception. Also rushed for 90 yards and another touchdown on 14 carries. That's his best performance on the ground since Clemson and Ohio State met last year when he ran for career-high 107 yards. The offensive line, which lost 4 of their 5 starters from last year, took a while to get their run blocking together. However, they are now in postseason form, opening holes for running back Travis Etienne, who notched 124 yards on just 10 carries in the ACC title game. That's his first 100-yard game since October. The passing game lost Justin Ross for the season due to spine surgery, was without Joseph Nagata and Frank Ladson Jr. for large parts of the season, and yet the Tiger wide receiver core still put up huge numbers. Senior Amari Rodgers and redshirt senior Cornell Powell having the best seasons of their careers, and true freshman E.J. Williams is breaking out as a downfield threat at just the right time. Oh, yeah, and Etienne has 44 catches for 524 yards. Clemson's 6th-ranked defense is statistically one of the best in college football, and stylistically, or schematically, if you will, there are a few more versatile groups in the nation. Brett Venables is a seasoned coordinator who seemingly has no shortage of different looks, pressures, counters, and counters to counters. They rank number 5 nationally in yards per play allowed, number 11 in scoring, number 9 in third down defense, number 4 in sacks, number 3 in tackles for loss, and number 2 in tackles for lost yardage. The Buckeye rushing attack is one of the best Clemson's going to face this season, but their own run defense is one of the best in the country. They held Notre Dame to 44 yards after allowing them 208 in that 47-40 double overtime shootout in November. Irish running back Kyron Williams is the only 100-yard rusher Clemson allowed all season. He put up 140 in that first game, though 65 came on his first carry. Clemson held him to 50 yards on 15 carries the second time they faced him. Buckeye running back Trey Sermon will be a handful, but I would be surprised if he gets anywhere remotely close to the 331 yards he put up in the Big Ten title game. Ohio State is going to need Justin Fields to make plays with both his arms and his legs to force the Clemson defense into stressful situations. Clemson plays some form of zone most of the time, to almost 73%. As far as pass coverage, they do not allow plays over the top of that defense. They supplement that coverage with an ability to rush the passer, generating pressure on 43.3% of dropbacks. That's fifth in the nation. Another 12 of 27 for 114 yards, 0 TDs and 2 interceptions, like he had in the Big Ten championship game, will not cut it for Mr. Fields. Clemson's opponents are scoring TDs on 54% of their red zone trips. That's Clemson's worst mark since 2016 and significantly worse than the 42% rates they allowed touchdowns in the red zone last year. So if Ohio State can do better than their average 62% TD rate in the red zone, they have a chance to at least put points on the board and make this game competitive, but it's going to take their best offensive performance of the season to beat Clemson, and that's only if their defense can find a way to contain Lawrence and his mates. I don't see it happening, Rabbi. I think Clemson wins this game, and while it may be closer than some folks think the Tigers are still going to be too much for the Buckeyes again.
Well, here's the thing, though. The game that they had last year at the Fiesta Bowl, this one I feel a little more confident about, even though Ohio State's played more of like a JV schedule going into this game. I think Clemson, the game that they had last year at the Fiesta Bowl is one of the best college football semifinals, if not one of the best college football games in this decade that I've seen. Ohio State had led that game pretty handily until a targeting call kind of woke up Clemson in a big way. I think Fields played excellent in this game, and I think Justin Fields is an amazing college quarterback, enough that this is a game that he is going to be motivated to. The two interceptions last year that he threw in that game, he went 30 for 46, and I don't think 46 times throwing the ball is going to get him anywhere, going for 320, 1 TD. But the interception that he threw with under a minute to go was just a backbreaker, and they could have easily got the touchdown and won this game 30-29. Instead, it was 29-23. Rushing attack, I think, is about the same as when he had J.K. Dobbins last year. Dobbins went 18 carries for 174 and 1 touchdown. I think the wide receiver core is going to be the biggest issue. I think as long as Fields can get time to throw to the wide receiving core and allow it to be a team that can have a little bit of balance on offense, I kind of like Ohio State here. I haven't really liked the way Clemson has played all year. Their schedule, they avoided North Carolina. They did play Miami, but Miami is suspect in a little bit of ways. I don't think they're ready for the big time. Sorry, Nisa. I think this is a very, very good Clemson team, but I think Trevor Lawrence, despite what Dabo Swinney says, has not played at a Heisman level quality this year. I think obviously the COVID issues had something to do with that. I think the pressure of being this #1 quarterback and the pressure of people asking him every single week, are you going to stay at Clemson? Are you going to stay at Clemson? Why are you going to go to the Jets? Why are you going to go to the Jets? So I think that weighs on a quarterback every single year. I think Ohio State has nothing to lose in this game. No one thinks they should be here. No one thinks that a 6-0 team should ever play for a national title. I don't think an 8-0 national champion is something people are going to be excited about. There's going to be asterisk upon asterisk upon asterisk upon asterisk to this title if Ohio State wins. Don't think the Buckeyes care. I don't think they care at all. I think this is going to be a classic game just like it was last year. Clemson's offensive coordinator, Tony Elliott, is with COVID, so he's not making the trip to New Orleans. And Ohio State's best weapon, Kirk Herbstreit, is also not making it to New Orleans. He's going to call the Sugar Bowl remotely because of COVID issues as well. I think this is going to be another classic game in New Orleans. And this one, just like the one at the Fiesta Bowl last year, can go either way. And eventually the ball has to bounce the Buckeyes way.
Yeah, but not this
year. Well, it has to eventually happen. Joe?
I hope so, because I'm tired of watching games that are unwatchable. And, because not being a fan of one of these teams and not being somebody that grew up in Ohio or being somebody who grew up in a Michigan or something like that, I don't have one of these teams that I don't care if they lose every game for 10 years, I'm still a backer of them. So it's tough for me to watch bad football. I see enough bad football as a referee, believe it or not. I don't need to go seek it out.
I'm not surprised.
I don't need to go seek it out and watch it. So I hope that this game is better. I do think Justin Fields is a better quarterback than he's been, and I think he's made some strides. Again, it's tough when you've only played 6 games, and you probably should have lost 2 of those. The Indiana game was close, and even the Northwestern, those guys could have caught the ball on defense or on offense, that game could have been different too. So I don't think they exactly rolled through their 6 games, was my point. That since you're only going to play 6 games, you might want to win those by a few points. So, and they avoided playing Michigan to a lot of people's dismay. A lot of people blame that on Harbaugh not wanting to lose to them again.
Yeah.
But I think you have to
Only Sean.
Only Sean.
Exactly.
Our
I think you have
conspiracy
to
theorists.
figure out ways to. I think you have to figure out ways, like Coastal Carolina did, like BYU did, to go out and find
agreed.
teams. I don't care who you are. Go play them and put the money in the coffers and go ahead from there and have your guys play games. Hey, they may be fresher than everybody else. They may be better than everybody else. You don't know because they haven't been out there that much. I hope it's a close game. But I think you're right also, Rabbi. This has the chance to be a close game because last year's game came down to the very end, and it was a very well-played game. I don't think Clemson is as strong as they were last year in certain spots. So I think it brings them closer together. But they're both very well-coached teams. But I think this will be the better of the 2 games. I still think it comes down to – I still think we have Clemson, Alabama 2 weeks from today, whatever it is. I don't think we have that as a change. But I think this game can be close. And, again, Rabbi, as you said, there could be a missed field goal, a missed extra point. There could be a fumble on the goal line. There could be some sort of tip pass that changes this game. Hopefully it's that close that something like that can happen and can be an exciting game.
Yeah, no, it's a funny thing, Joe, is that Rabbi and I are both guys who have college football teams that we have rooting interests in. So it's interesting for us to kind of like look at it through your perspective of a guy who is just looking to see and looking to have a good game. And, that of the 2, I agree with you. I think Clemson-Ohio State has the better chance of being a better game for, say, the casual college football fan or the non-rooting interest college football fan than Alabama-Notre Dame. I would like to see both games be competitive just because you hope that, like, when you put supposedly those 4 teams on the field, you are getting competitive matchups, but it has been the case pretty much since the CFP was originated, Rabbi, and you can feel free to correct me here. It seems like there's at least one of the 4 who is just a little bit below the other 3 and has made one of those games not as competitive as we would like to see for a semifinal.
Oh, absolutely. I think Oklahoma is kind of the perfect example of that the last 2 years with Kyler Murray, quarterback 2 years ago against Alabama in a national semifinal in the Orange Bowl. And last year, they weren't even belonging on the same field as LSU in the Peach Bowl, even though Jalen Hurts was quarterback and has had so many moments over there. Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting, though, because college football has had, I'm just going to say it, a terrible year. Cancellation upon cancellation upon cancellation. You're seeing bowl games get canceled now. You saw an Army team that was almost not at a bowl at 9-2. When you're seeing right now a game with a 4-4 team against a 3-3 team in a bowl, which is utterly ridiculous.
Yep.
You're going to see some big bowls tonight. Florida doesn't have their 4 top receiving threats going up against Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. And again, the Rose Bowl is in Arlington, Texas. There is just nothing right about that in any way, shape, or form.
No,
the tradition that
utterly
happened. It's
wrong.
stupid. It's
wrong.
stupid. And I think it had something to do with what Brian Kelly had said at Notre Dame about not having family over there, which is right about. But again, this college football season just is so wrong to me, and that has nothing to do with LSU giving themselves a postseason ball ban and being 5-5, although that might have something to do with it. I think this has just been a terrible year for college football, and I'm hoping that it has the ending that it deserves. Speaking of endings that we deserve, time to go. Thank you for joining us as we are now officially done with 2020. For Jay Kaplan and Mr. Joe Tufaro, writer of Last Word on Sports and debater of many, many things. Let's hope the Giants win on Sunday so he has some playoff stuff to talk about. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz. We'll see you again on Wednesday, Jan 6th at 9:30, where we will have a Jets and maybe Giants. We'll see. Post-mortem, or we'll have a playoff preview. Plus the definitive, you can't get it anywhere else, wild card round preview right here. No one's going to talk about it but us. Please watch us every week live when we go back live in 2021 on Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. You can catch up this show in a day or two, and any of the shows you might have missed at YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines and at Twitter at ONTH where the guy over here in the Steelers jersey or Steelers hoodie will find himself putting up this show, whether it be today, tomorrow, or on New Year's Day. Thank you for joining us and supporting us for all of 2020. I'm not going to say the same thing I said on Monday because I lost my voice at that point. So I'm just going to say thank you and have a good day.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank
Joe,
Happy New Year.
my friend.
See ya.